Back on the Common Sense Club, and he's starting a show. We love him because he loves hockey. He was a great governor, and he's an all-around good guy. Tim Pawlenty, back with us on the Common Sense Club, and he's starting a show. Hi, Governor. How are you?
So you only love me for the hockey, huh, Scott?
I said many reasons. All-around good guy.
Many reasons. Okay.
Good governor.
All right, I accept that. Well, we love you for many reasons as well. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, our best to Mary and the girls and everybody, and nice to have you back. It was good to see you in New Hampshire and get caught up. Let me first ask you about the game changer, South Carolina. Game on, right?
Yeah, if you go back not just a few weeks, but a few months and ask people who are close observers of this, I think they would have said, look, Mitt's going to do well, and New Hampshire and Florida and South Carolina is going to be an uphill climb, and the fact that he might win there, or the possibility of him winning there, was really more of a recent phenomena. So it's sort of back to the original game plan for Mitt, but it's certainly a competitive race. There's a lot of candidates who are, 3 or 4 who are obviously competing hard, and Mitt and anyone else is going to have to go out and earn every vote. But if you look at who's not spent their whole life in Washington, D.C., who's actually been in the private sector, who knows the most about job growth, the leading issue in the country, and has the steadiness and sturdiness to actually survive a campaign and be president, I think, in my view, Scott, it leads you to Mitt Romney.
So why is the GOP electorate not sold on the guy? Why is after 3 contests, he's 1 for 3, the narrative of this guy as the presumptive nominee is gone? We have a battle in Florida. Why can't this guy close the deal?
Well, in fairness, he came in a close second in Iowa, just essentially a statistical tie, which is overperforming. He did very, very well in New Hampshire. He didn't win South Carolina, and he may well win Florida. So to look at that and say, gosh, that's not very good for a Republican candidate, by historical standards, it's quite good. So it's really not a fair premise. I'm not saying you're suggesting it to say, Mitt's not doing well. Now, there's a lot of people who I don't think are familiar fully with his record, but none of these candidates are perfect. If you look at Mitt's record, as governor, cut taxes, cut spending, stood for traditional marriage, stood for the pro-life cause, and vouched for by faith leaders and value-based leaders in that state, and has turned around a very troubled situation in Massachusetts, a very troubled situation in the Olympics, and he's got deep private sector conservative business experience. And I think people will look at the other candidates and they just assume, well, they're all, gold-plated, unflawed conservatives. That's not true. I know their records, Scott. If you put any of the others up on there, we can go through their, baggage or laundry and show that they've got some battle scars or some clunkers in the closet as well.
Everybody does. There's no question. But I've been on a bit of a journey.
There's nobody who's been in the battle and actually done something as opposed to just giving speeches. I mean, there's a distinction. I always say there's a big difference between being an orator and a speech maker or, going to a rally and the like, and I've done all that too. But when you're the executive, when you're the decision maker, and you've got to bring together a bunch of disparate groups, and you make decisions, you're going to have some things in your record that aren't perfect in everybody's eyes.
And I've gone on a bit of a journey. One, in this sense, that I was of the opinion that Mitt Romney was the best one to beat Barack Obama, and sort of resigned that he was going to be the guy. And while he might have not been the ideal candidate, he sort of morphed into the composite candidate. And there's enough pieces there where we can check the box and say, okay. And I got to say personally that my journey went off that path a little bit through this whole circular firing squad over what is capitalism. And I started that by being quite critical of the other Republican nominees to say, why are you doing all the things that we know the Democrats are going to do in attacking the private sector and capitalism? And I came away with that to say, you know what? Wait a minute. Maybe we need that conversation, because quite honestly, I'm tired of being told that Mitt Romney represents capitalism and the private sector, because he doesn't. I think your dad busting his rear, trying to put you through school is a lot more of a representation of capitalism, or the guy that busted his butt to hire him than basically a financier, than a banker. I think all the acumen he has contributes something. I think venture capital and Bain Capital in his story certainly plays a role in taking companies from one level to the next and creating jobs and everything else. But gosh, not in a Henry Ford, Alexander Graham Bell, Steve Jobs, Harold Hamm kind of way. So I think
those are great comments, Scott. Look, there's 6 million businesses in the United States. 5.9 million of them or so have 500 employees or fewer. So if you want to get to the heart of the American economy and the backbone of the American economy, it's small and medium-sized businesses and people who start up and how you grow that is a key question, and I don't think the answer resides in people who spent their whole life in Washington, D.C. And there's only one person on that stage remaining of the four candidates who hasn't spent the bulk of his entire adult life in Washington, D.C. or in parasitic relationship with Washington, D.C., and that's Mitt Romney.
I think I totally get what you're saying, and I understand that. I think that's a product of the four we have. That's the choice before us. I think people, quite honestly, are less worried about that. Even though that's certainly, if you're doing checks and pluses and minuses, that's a minus for the other three you're talking about that are not your guy. However, I think people are mad enough about the country being broken enough. Bud McFarland said it to me this way in South Carolina. He said, "You know what? People believe their government is broken. And the only time they can remember their government actually working, there was a guy by the name of Newt Gingrich as Speaker. So while I would prefer that he have more private sector experience, he's giving voice to a lot of people right now who say, hey, he's been there, done that. Now, I worry about Newt Gingrich as the ultimate nominee for, I think, the questions you've raised, electability. And electability from the standpoint is, which Newt would be the nominee? Would it be good Newt or would it be bad Newt? If he wins the battle and it's good Newt, and it's that Newt giving voice to conservative principles and voicing our frustrations, I think the guy destroys President Obama on Election Day in 2012. If it's bad Newt, I probably would have preferred a safer candidate. But I think the process we're going through right now is extremely healthy. I hope it lasts a while. I think it's good for everybody. Am I wrong?
Those are good points, Scott. I would add a couple of things. One is, of course, our Republican and conservative base is angry, and for good reason. So I think for some who may have been a little hesitant towards Mitt, they say, gosh, where's that anger? Where's that passion? And I think if they get to know him, they'll see more of that. Now, he's obviously not the big bomb thrower, I shouldn't name names, but say somebody who has the fiery rhetoric of a Herman Cain or the like. But guess what? We can have people get all excited at rallies, and that's important. But if we don't have a candidate who can also inspire but also get elected, then it's all just a big debating society. It's all a big show. And we've seen with Barack Obama what oratory and emotional decisions gets you. That's one component of leadership is inspiration, but you also have to be able to survive a campaign, not have baggage, actually get elected, and importantly, actually be able to do the job and have the temperament, sturdiness, values, compass setting, feet on the ground to be able to do it. And I tip the cap to Newt. He's got a great speech-making abilities at times, but that's not the full toolkit of being president. And by the way, if you look at the numbers, set aside my rhetoric or advocates' records, there's no question that the most electable candidate is Mitt. Just look at the numbers. Obama beats Newt comfortably.
It has been the case up until South Carolina. Newt's got a big boost in that area, but you're right. The numbers are there. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and Newt's role in that has been something that's concerned you quite a bit. You've mentioned that before. What about Mitt Romney investing in it? Isn't he guilty of the same thing Newt is in a different way?
Well, I think you're referring to some of Mitt's investments were a bundle of bonds that had to deal with the housing market. Those were passive investments. I think that's different than being the strategic advisor to Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae. And by the way, Newt started out by saying, if you remember, he got paid $1.7 million to be a historian. Now, that turns out to be not accurate, to put it charitably. And now
I don't know. We're up against a hard break. You got time for a couple minutes on the other side of the break to finish this?
Yeah, sure.
All right, hang on 2 seconds. We'll chat more after this. Former Governor Tim Pawlenty, friend of the program, the Common Sense Club, gracious enough to stay with us for a little while longer to talk a little bit about his support for Governor Mitt Romney in this presidential race and a couple other things as well. Appreciate you staying with us. Governor, you were making a point about the difference between Newt Gingrich's advisory role towards Fannie and Freddie and Governor Romney's investment in it. So I wanted to let you go ahead and finish that point.
I think it's the main thing. I think, Scott, was to have transparency around what Newt was doing and what advice he gave and the like. He released his contract. If they indicate, at least as a technical matter, that he didn't intend to allow, although there's some suggestion or at least concern that perhaps he still did. But at least that's out. But the broader question is, he should have said, look, I was a historian for Freddie Mac, and it turns out that that's just not accurate. So we needed to get that clarified as well.
Back to the electability point, we have a listener in Canby, Minnesota. You been there before?
Yes, sir.
Yellow Medicine County, the birthplace of my mother, I'll have you know. Anyway, Becky, actually it was St. Leo, but close to Canby. And I still remember 411 West 4th. 411 West 4th or 6th? I can't remember. Anyway, my grandparents lived there forever. Becky says the governor must not have seen the Rasmussen report stats showing Newt and Mitt 47% each against Barack Obama. So some of the electability numbers are surging for Gingrich in Santorum, by the way, at 36%. So he's closing in as well. Some of the numbers are surging to catch up with Romney, is I guess the point.
Yeah, we should look at those numbers over time. And, of course, if you look at one poll and one snapshot in time, that's one data point. But if you look at a bunch of them as a rolling average over time, you can see a direction or you can see a trend or you can perhaps even reach a tentative conclusion. And so notwithstanding that one Rasmussen poll, as you noted, the bulk of the polls over the bulk of the time have shown Mitt to be the strongest candidate against President Obama, but he's going to have to continue to prove that to be the case.
You know, what's interesting, though, it seems to me that the storyline has changed significantly. I mean, do the Romney? Do you concede that as a Romney supporter that what was really a pretty much a foregone conclusion? Won Iowa by a few, still came in first, but New Hampshire he won solidly. Had a big lead in South Carolina. Voila, that goes away. Lead in Florida goes away. That we have a very different contest today than we did pre-South Carolina. That Mitt Romney is in a battle for the GOP nomination. Would you concede that?
Well, that's for sure true, Scott. We are in a battle for the nomination, but it doesn't reflect a change in the Romney campaign's thinking. If you go back and look at Mitt's comments and the campaign's comments going back many months, they always said this was going to be a long effort. It's going to be a lot longer than people think. And, when I was running against Mitt, we assumed his strategy would be to take his lumps in Iowa, take his lumps in South Carolina, but try to win New Hampshire and, the bigger demographic and money state of Florida, and then go on from there to Nevada and Michigan and Arizona, where he's got some head start and some advantage built in as well. So I don't think this, from an internal Romney standpoint, it doesn't represent a change from what they presume would be the case to start. What it does represent, though, is a change in what the punditry or the media assumed about the race just as recently as a few weeks ago. They had thought Mitt was going to run the table all the way through Florida, and so it's a change in that perspective.
With the release of Governor Romney's taxes, can he get beyond the focus on his wealth? Should it be an issue? I mean, what do you make of this? And do you think that's what happened in South Carolina, where Newt maybe stepped up his game and Romney was off his game a little bit, didn't answer the tax question well, and it sort of snowballed? Yeah,
Mitt acknowledged that was a mistake, and he himself said he just should have released it sooner. And then now that we see them out, there's no surprises in there. It shows, number one, that Mitt's been very successful. I think everybody knew that. Number two, that he's paid a lot in taxes. And number three, he's given a lot away to charity. And number four, that he's complied with all the tax laws. So I don't think there's any real surprise in there. So I think he acknowledged he should have just released it sooner. And now you see people's reaction to it is they're already saying, look, it's what we expected. Let's move on to the next thing.
And by the way, I'm waiting for the Washington.
As to his wealth, Scott, there's an interesting thing. He said in the debate the other night, I didn't inherit my wealth. He went out and earned it. And I don't think whether you're Newt or another Republican or any American should say, you know what, we're going to criticize or look down on people who have exercised economic freedom, started something, grew something, and been successful.
Totally.
Done it legally and ethically, and he did that.
Completely agree with you. And, I think that's what we expect from the other side. I mean, just the fact that he has wealth. By the way, I think he's got a great story. He gave 15% to charity. President Obama gave 1%. Joe Biden less than that. I mean, there's a way for Romney to flip this whole tax issue on Obama, isn't it? I mean, what an important narrative there.
Yeah, people are focusing on the 15% that Mitt paid, but keep in mind that's on investment income. It's capital gains at 15%, and the original investment money that made that money was taxed, when he made it previously. So it's not just the 15% you have to focus on. And then beyond that, he's obviously a very generous person. He's given a great both percentage and an absolute dollar amounts to his church and to charities and other civic organizations, and I think that reflects a statement about his priorities and values as well.
The number to charity I heard is like 15%. So again, I know the tax number is up there as well, and as you say, but I just think the contrast on what he's given, the percentage of his income to charity, compared to President Obama, ought to be an issue in this race.
Well, no question, and I'm sure it will be. And President Obama, look, he loves to get up and talk about economic division. He should be focused on growing the pie, not trying to incite people to fight over ever shrinking smaller pieces of the pie. And the truth is, compared to most Americans, President Obama is extraordinarily wealthy, and he's got millions and millions and millions of dollars of assets and income. And he gets up and lectures the rest of us about his view of class warfare. And again, he should be focused on trying to grow the pie and economic growth, not inciting people to fight with each other over smaller pieces of the pie.
Do you think that the speech last night by the president, the State of the Union address, was a speech written with Mitt Romney in mind, as a lot of the pundits do?
It seems like the references there relate to Mitt, if not by name, at least thematically, and I agree completely with you. This wasn't the State of the Union. It was the state of his campaign speech, and he went back to his seminal Kansas speech that he gave some weeks or months ago, which is basically his class warfare / populism speech. And I don't think people are going to buy it. I think history shows that Americans don't buy class warfare. They want everybody to have a fair shot at it. They want the playing field to be level, but they don't punish success as long as it's done by the rules, legally and ethically. That's what Mitt Romney did. And by the way, if there was ever a moment in time in recent history where we needed somebody who is from the private sector, who understands to the core of his being economic freedom, that's now, and that's Mitt.
Everybody I asked prior to South Carolina, what are the odds that Mitt Romney's the GOP nominee? We're in the 85-15, 90-10 category. Obviously, a lot of folks thinking differently. You've acknowledged that this is a battle for the nomination, but you say, hey, that we always thought it would be. What's the number today that Mitt Romney's the nominee in your view? How do you handicap this?
I think he pulls out Florida. Obviously, it's tightened up significantly. I think you'll see some polling showing that he's regained the momentum. The debate tomorrow night, Thursday night, is going to be an important factor. The ground game is going to be important. Early voting is going to be important. My prediction is he will win in Florida. And if you look to the states coming up, namely Michigan, Nevada, Arizona.
Oh, you're going to keep us in suspense. We got to go. Thanks, Governor.